So I like talking about beauty and social justice. I recently stumbled on this creator. He's a plastic surgeon. His name is Gary Linkov, and I hope I'm saying his name correctly. I watched one of his most recent videos where he was talking about like how natural beauty is not really celebrated anymore, and people are trying to look very artificial with plastic surgery. They're trying to achieve a beauty standard that's just not achievable for most of us. When I was younger, I used to not like my nose. I used to wish I had a smaller nose. I used to wish I had more of a kind of European looking nose. And this is actually something that a lot of black people like think about, and a lot of black people actually do get rhinoplasties to change the natural shape of their nose to make it thinner and less spread. But as I got older, I realized there's nothing wrong with my nose, and it suits my face. Like, this is my nose and there's nothing wrong with it, and there's no need to change it. And I think it's honestly kind of sad when people try to change certain characteristics that are very distinct for their ethnicity because they're trying to achieve a very Eurocentric standard of beauty. I found that whenever people talk about Eurocentric standards of beauty, there are people that like to get very upset about it, and they'll try to tell you that that's not a real thing or it doesn't affect them in their society, and that's just not true. It's really not unique to the United States. It's a universal phenomenon. It's not just in the United States where people prefer certain features like lighter skin or straighter hair textures or smaller noses. It's really a universal phenomenon. And I think it's a result of the history of like Europeans trying to colonize a lot of different places in the world. It's not just a result of, for example, classism in certain cultures where they like lighter skin rather than darker skin because people who were richer didn't have to be out in the fields and didn't have to work, so they had lighter skin, so they associated that with higher status. Like, that's definitely a part of it, but when people act like that's the only reason that they prefer certain features and they don't want to acknowledge the influence of colonialism or just generally white supremacy in the way that it has essentially infected pretty much every society in this world. And I just wrote a comment expressing that because I know that growing up as a black girl in a community where whiteness is seen as more beautiful and black people who look more white are seen as more beautiful. Like, I know that that impacted how I felt about beauty and how I felt about my own beauty. So when people, all I did was write a comment saying that I knew that and that's how I felt and that was my experience. It wasn't really surprising to me that people then kind of like jumped out of the woodwork to try to make it seem like, oh, this is not a problem. Oh, this doesn't happen here. Oh, you're trying to make it all about black and white people. And it's just like that kind of like denial that so many people have to like recognize these problems. It's so frustrating. And this happens all the time, especially if you're like a black person or you're a minority and you bring up just the phrase Eurocentric beauty standards. That gets some people really, really in their feelings and they hate it and they like just don't want to acknowledge it at all. But just based on my experience moving through the world as a person of color, particularly as a black woman, and also the experiences I've had with anti-blackness and racism, and also me just observing other cultures and the anti-blackness within those cultures, like, it's very obvious, it's very apparent. It's not like I'm talking about something that's made up. Like, I'm not making things up, okay? Like, this is a reality, and I wish that people would face it instead of automatically, like, knee-jerk, just getting defensive and just rejecting it. This is the kind of response that I've come to expect from people. It happens all the time. It's not even just to black people who talk about these issues. If you're a white person and you acknowledge these things and you talk about these things, people are going to get upset about it too. But it's like, if you don't talk about stuff, if you don't acknowledge it, then nothing's ever going to change. So like, I'm not going to stop talking about it. I'm not going to stop speaking up about it because it matters to me. And I don't like people being treated a certain way because of how they look or because of their race or because of their skin tone or their features. Like, I hate that shit. It just pisses me off. So I'm not going to stop talking about it. You can get angry all you want. You can say whatever rude things you want to say, but you're not going to get me to shut up. I'm not going to stop talking about it.